Hi, my name is Grant Hill. This is my video for Module 1 weekly project, the report cards from the NFLPA. So I chose three teams. I chose the Chicago Bears, Washington Commanders, and Kansas City Chiefs. So reason for this choice is that I am a Bears and Chiefs fan, originally from Chicago, and grew up mostly in Kansas City. So that's the reason for those two teams. And then the Commanders, I know have a pretty strong reputation for kind of poor ownership. Um, just not being ran well, one of maybe the worst run professional sports organizations in the United States. So I just thought it'd be interesting to check out their grades. So, um, firstly, I would say something I noticed was the ownership grades. So the Bears had a B plus, Commanders had a B, and Chiefs had an F minus. Now the first takeaway I would have about this is the Chiefs being an F minus. Um, the Chiefs are obviously a very successful organization. They've won three titles in 5 years, three Super Bowls. So that's surprising. You would think that the ownership grade would be very high, but ownership has a lot to do with things that aren't on the field. Um, and they're actually ranked as the 32nd owner out of 32, so the worst owner in the NFL. I would say my takeaway about that is I think that this is a lot to do with like the situation with like Indiana basketball with Bob Knight, where because they're winning, a lot of the problems with the organization tend to get overlooked because success kind of negates everything else. So I'm wondering if this is my question for the future would be if the Chiefs start to experience less success, will we hear more players come out about the ownership and the organization being ran poorly? Because they're not right now. And I think a lot of that to do is with the success. And I would also wonder if a lot of these problems with the organization, like a lot of these low grades with like, excuse me, with like the locker room, the training staff, or like the locker room is a grade of an F, the training staff with an F, or a training room with a D. Like I would just wonder if a lot of these low grades are long-standing because the Cork Hunt and just the Hunt family has been ownership of the Chiefs for a very long time. So my question would be, two questions would be, will players start to come out about the problems with the organization at later dates if the organization starts to experience less success? And number two is, are these problems or are these low grades long-standing issues? Because the Hunts have owned the organization for a long time. Um, and then the Commanders actually had a B with ownership, which was surprising. That might be due to new owner Josh Harris, and it says here that he's more willing to invest in facilities, so certainly that's a big help. But Dan Snyder ran the organization for about 25 years, and I think that's probably the result of a lot of these low grades. That would be my takeaway. Is that Dan Snyder did not run the organization very well, and a lot of these low grades are probably due to him because Josh Harris has only been the owner for like a year or so. Pretty new owner, um, and so a lot of these grades are probably more due to Dan Snyder. It just shows like how one bad reign of like management or leadership can affect an organization for a long time. Like um, back when the Commanders were formerly the Redskins, they won like three Super Bowls in I think almost a decade or something like that. I forget because it was so long ago, well before I was born. But very successful organization. And then Dan Snyder comes in as the owner and has a very poor tenure. And now you see Josh Harris having to deal with a lot of these low grades and just low rankings for a lot of the facilities and kind of treatment of the players and things. So um, it just shows how important it is that leadership is consistent and successful. Would be my takeaway. And then with the Bears, you have an ownership grade of a B plus, so it seems like the McCaskies are well liked. Seems like they can be a little bit disconnected, but they invest in the facilities well. The Bears have really good grades for locker room, training room, um, good travel accommodations. So it seems like they treat the players well, and so that's a big thing. It seems like just organizationally, the Bears are ran a lot better than the Commanders. So maybe the Bears' reputation is more due to just on-field failures, and the Commanders is just all around on-field failures off the field. Um, and so that's something I would say. Um, I'd also say with the head coach rankings, Andy Reid's an A plus first in the league. That's to be expected. Andy Reid is one of the most successful coaches in the league, one of the most well liked coaches. That is not surprising. Um, and then the Bears, Eberflus is a B. That's a little surprising. My takeaway about that would be um, maybe it's just the coach, the way that coaches are perceived in the media might be a little bit inaccurate because it seems here like Eberflus listens to his players fairly well and he's liked well enough. Um, but the media is pretty hard on him. But maybe just to like give him more time because it seems like he is well liked by his players, and maybe that will introduce more success in the future. And then Rivera has a C for the Commanders. What I thought was interesting here was that a big perception around the league is wanting to hire younger coaches because maybe they connect with players better or maybe they're more innovative. But Reed is actually one of the oldest coaches in the NFL, and he's an A plus grade. So it seems like stability and success and mentorship and things that come with maybe being an older coach are a lot more valued than maybe we think they are. Um, Rivera is a little bit of an older coach too, but he's only been a coach since like 2010 or 2011, and Reed has been a head coach since the 90s, and before that was a quarterbacks coach. Um, so he's been around a lot longer as a head coach, especially. And then Eberflus is a really young head coach, only in his second year. So, um, and these guys, like I said, their grades are okay, but Reed is incredibly well liked. So that'd be my takeaway there with like leadership and like organizational behavior is like stability matters. And someone who's been doing it for a long time and had a lot of success, that seems to matter. That seems to be a big factor with the Chiefs and Reed's grade. Another takeaway I would have is just like the nutritionist grades and the food grades were poor for like all three franchises, or at least we're not up to where they should be. So I'd say that seems to be kind of getting overlooked. But the locker room grades, the training room grades, were not good for the Chiefs or Commanders, but like for the Bears, for example, was really good, but the nutrition and food grade were still C's. So it seems like the Bears and probably a lot of organizations are like this. They're maybe more focused on things that are a little bit more showy, like that you can show on social media or locker room or a training room or things of that sort. And things like travel accommodations, food, that stuff's maybe being overlooked a little bit because it's not something that you can like broadcast to the world. It's kind of more internal. I think that's a little bit disappointing because food and nutrition, like that matters. If your players don't have the proper food and nutrition, they're not going to be as healthy. They're probably going to be more tired. They're going to have lower energy levels. Maybe they're not getting the protein that they need. Strength is important in a lot of positions in football. Um, so that stuff I think is concerning, and I think in the future might lead to more injuries. Maybe it's part of the reason we see a lot of injuries now. Like I know the past couple of years, injuries have been a big concern in the NFL. A lot of quarterbacks and like big time players have been hurt, and maybe this is part of that. Um, so I don't know, but I would point that out that's pretty you know the trend seems to be around the league that food nutritionist ratings, at least the three teams I looked at, are not great, and we see a lot of injuries in the league. Um, so I would say that. Um, Treatment of the families, the Bears had a good grade, but the other two did not. Um, Not really much to say there. Besides, once again, it seems like the Bears organizationally, as opposed to the other two, seem to care about their players a little bit more. Um, so that might be due to the ownership. I don't know exactly what the reason for that is, but um, just something to point out. I feel like when players feel like their families are cared for, they're more likely to want to play for that team. Like a famous example I can think of is like when Tim Duncan didn't play for the Magic in free agency, chose to stay with the Spurs because Greg or the coach of the Magic at the time would not, Doc Rivers, would not allow him to have his family on the team playing, but Greg Popovich, who was coach of the Spurs, would. So that's something that affects players. Um, Like one last takeaway I would have with like the grades in general would be I think the Bears grades might also be due to them just being a bigger market. And maybe they can just afford better facilities for that reason, and maybe it's not completely due to the ownership. Certainly, that's part of it, but Chicago is one of the biggest markets in the United States, and it's kind of more of a international city than Washington D.C. and Kansas City. Kansas City, especially, is a lot smaller. I'm from there, so I would know, but I think um, I think that might be part of it too. So take what I have is like being a bigger market can definitely affect some of these things. It can make it easier for the organization to afford better facilities, better travel accommodations, things like that. Um, um, yeah. Um, don't really have much else to say, but like I was saying, this is definitely interesting. It seems like the players' perception of how the organizations are run is maybe a little bit different than the media's perception or our perception as fans or outsiders. Um, like it seems like the Bears are the best ran out of all three of these, which is kind of the opposite of what you would think. Um, so my last key takeaway would just be like you need to do a better job at like listening to the players because it seems like it's a lot different what the players experience than what we feel like they experience. Um, but that's all I have to say about that. I want to thank you for listening to my presentation, and so I just thought it was interesting. And yeah, thank you.